And then we ran the numbers and we said, okay, we have all this acreage. How many chickens do we need to raise a year to start seeing these benefits across the whole farm for the chickens to get to every piece of this land? And the calculator literally spit out the number 1 million. And
A million chickens. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was stunned when it happened, and it was like the universe saying no. It's just saying F no. And so my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, we didn't even really think about it. We're like, no, nobody wants that. You can't have 1 million birds. The management alone would be terrifying. Where do you have them processed? Where do you have them sold? So we didn't do that.
This is the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Revitalizing the world together. Welcome to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. This is your host, Neil Collins. It is a show that is supported by our work at Latitude Realty. In it, we explore our natural and built environments and how they can be used as a force for good. The show sets out to inspire impactful ideas, meaningful change, human wellness, and ecological restoration through interviews and easy-to-digest conversations. Our guests range from industry leaders to iconoclasts, from both well-known figures to everyday people leading extraordinary lives. This is a show for people looking for education and inspiration on how real estate can be done differently. Hey everybody, this is your host, Neil Collins of the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. I am just over the moon, very excited about our conversation today. I've got Jesse McDougall on with Studio Hill out of Vermont. He is running a 5th generation farm with his wife, Caroline, and a co-founder of the Regenerative Food Network. And I know, Jesse, you've got an amazing backstory. Let's just jump into it. How on earth did you end up in Vermont running a farm and doing everything that you're doing right now?
Well, thank you, Neil. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. I love the podcast. Quite by accident, I assure you. I didn't grow up farming. I grew up in the mountains of New Hampshire, which I loved. Spent a lot of time outside, but didn't think about ecology much, or soil, or food production, or anything like that. I grew up, eating out of the drive-through window and working at McDonald's and eating 3 meals a day there. And it was, I thought that was fine for much of my life. And I was a web geek. I was kind of a techie and fell into that and kind of pursued a career in that. And my wife, Caroline, we call her Cally. So if I refer to her as Cally here, I'm speaking about her. Cally is the 4th generation of a family farm, and she didn't grow up on the farm, but because her aunt ran it, and she lived with her parents just a few hours away, but would go whenever she could. She loved it and spent summers there and winter breaks there. And I think one of our first road trips, no, I could say our first road trip when we were just dating, was to the family farm. And I fell in love with it right away. Just as a place, it has really tremendous energy and it's great views. And her aunt Edie was running it at the time and had been since Edie was 16 years old. And she had been running it as a horse and hay operation, like a horse boarding training thing. But before that, it had been a dairy, and into the first 2 generations. And Callie and I always knew that we would one day end up at the farm, right? That was like after we'd been together a few years, and we, were close enough that we were making shared life plans. We both knew that we wanted to be at the farm at some point. And we figured in retirement, after Edie had, grown old and done her thing there. But that tragically, that opportunity came sooner than we expected when Edie got sick. She got brain cancer, glioblastoma, really aggressive brain cancer. And this woman was, a superhero. She was a pilot. She got her pilot's license before she got her driver's license, which is a funny story. And celebrated horse trainer, celebrated, I forget the word for it, but train both horses and riders. Horses aren't my world. And ran the farm, like made it look easy, and so when she passed a year later, there was a lot of hand wringing about what to do with the land, right? Nobody had managed it but her for 40 years, and nobody knew where the checkbook was, and nobody knew, what electrician she would call, all the day-to-day stuff, nobody had a handle on any of it. And so we were talking about selling the land, and we were talking about hiring managers, and we were talking about leasing it out. And Cally and I looked at each other for about half a second and raised our hands and said, we put us in, coach, give us a shot. We want to make an attempt at it. And because we loved it, we knew we wanted to be there at some point. And we weren't fans of our current position as web developers, and the client work was driving us nuts. And she's always been astoundingly beautiful, but I was getting pudgy around the middle and kind of gross, and just sitting at a desk all day, and I was anxious to get out of my chair. Anyway, for a lot of reasons, we put our hands up, and the first decision we made was to stop spraying chemicals, and no herbicides, no pesticides, no fertilizers, just stop everything that we were doing and had been doing for 40 years. No more tilling, no more corn, plant it all back to grass. And let's just be a organic. We thought in terms of organic at that time. Let's be an organic farm, not really knowing the implications of our decisions. And so after Edie passed, we did that. We took all the corn out, planted everything back to grass, didn't apply any fertilizer or anything, and just seeded everything back to grass. And we ran out of the farmhouse the next spring, and while the snow was receding, and did not see grass. We saw gravel, we saw rocks, we saw moss and slimy stuff. And as the snow continued that spring to pull back, we saw there was no grass growing in the field at all. Over most of our production acres, like the stuff that had been most recently in corn, was not able to grow anything. And we thought we panicked. It was just sheer panic at that point. We didn't know what we'd done wrong. We didn't know how to get it right. And we thought we'd messed up big time. And it was at that point that we started our journey into regenerative agriculture, because we needed to regenerate the farm, and we were stubborn, right? Stubborn and scared. So we weren't going to go back to the chemicals and in this time we had our first child, baby boy, which just cemented our resolve to not spray anything on the land again. We could not picture him running around in fields that are covered in God knows what, and so that's how it all started. And we fumbled our way forward.
Well, let's pick it up from there. I've got a couple questions just to get some clarity here. Where in Vermont is the farm?
Vermont, the forgotten corner of Vermont is what I like to call it. It's the southwestern corner of Vermont. We are 2 towns north of Massachusetts and 1 town east of New York. It is the corner just north of Bennington, Vermont. It is a gorgeous piece of land. It is it's on a ridge, like a high hilltop ridge between the Green Mountains to our east and the Taconics, I think, to our west. So it is got great views, and it's just this rolling wet hills that the great grandparents found in 1936 when they fled the Great Depression, looking for food security, and they knew that to have that they needed land because they watched the food system crumble in New York while they were down there.
How many
So
acres is it?
It's well, it's changing. I'm happy to say when we started in 2012, the farm was 250-ish acres, and now we are at 325
Oh, wow.
acres.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've one of the benefits, which I'm sure we'll talk about regenerative ag, is you get stronger over time. It's not, we were kicked off of the negative feedback loop, essentially, by a death in the family and terror and panic, and we weren't going back to it, and we'd hit the floor. The fields couldn't produce anything on their own biologically. We were farmed out, and of course I couldn't explain any of this to you at the time. I was just a guy sitting in front of a computer googling what is grass. But we've come to learn that the farm couldn't produce anything biologically. It had been dependent for some decades on these inputs to produce anything. And now I understand the reasons why, the production has gone in that way. But we weren't going to do it. And so we've been getting, economically stronger every year as we get ecologically stronger every year. And the books are looking good, and we're not printing money, but we can, get loans and be a viable operation for mortgages and that kind of thing. So it's allowed us to expand the farm footprint significantly, which has been fun. It just as a way of expanding our livestock operation, our farm stays operation, but also protecting the land that's there. The farm has a feel and a vista, and we don't want neighborhoods and paved roads and stoplights and stuff all around us like you see happening everywhere in rural places of the world, unfortunately. So that's given us tremendous hope.
Let me pick up this thread here, because it sounds like you've got your hands on 250 acres with a newborn, which is stressful enough. But yeah. On top of that, you've got 250 acres that's degrading in front of your eyes, but you've got a computer. Where do you even go to begin to seek out resources and guidance in order to turn that around?
Oh, it was tough. I went to YouTube. I tend to be I learn best through video and how-tos and all that kind of thing. And I just started looking for the most basic information, like how do you grow grass organically, which led me to how do you grow no-till fields, or how do you maintain a field in Vermont, and I found just all the information in the world online. But I bought a whole bunch of books as well, and I say I, but Cally was in this 100% with me, and we talked to every farmer in the area we could talk to, conventional, organic, otherwise, and we said, how do we maintain hay fields in this region productively without chemical inputs? how do we do it organically? And nobody that we talked to knew how to do it. And the farming organizations up here, one of them very well known, who I won't call out here, but they said, if you figure that out, you let us know. We'd love to know. And when I got that answer from that organization, I was like, oh, nobody knows. I have to figure this out, which of course was wrong. I just want to say that. Of course, that's wrong. But people knew, people have known, and I wasn't finding them at the time. When I started finding people, and I didn't figure it out. I just want to say that right now. I didn't figure it out. I made a whole bunch of errors. I tried a whole bunch of things and kind of fell on my face a lot. But what did happen is I stumbled across Alan Savory's TED Talk while I was researching all this stuff. And it happened on a night I wasn't actually researching stuff. I was up late. My boy was screaming, and it just came on. I'd been watching TED Talks. My boy, they lulled him to sleep, whatever. And it came on. And when Alan Savory started talking about the symptoms of desertification in the African grasslands, it caught my attention because it was exactly what I was seeing in my Vermont hayfield. It was the washouts, the bare soil, the rocks, the slimy goo, the reedy, stocky plants. And so I rewound it and I went back to the beginning to pay attention this time, and listened, 800 times that night, probably, try to figure it out. Because in my experience, which was limited, I had seen the destruction the horses had done on the farm. I had seen the horse paddocks turn to gravel or be gravel. I didn't watch them turn to gravel, but I had seen pictures of the dairy cows creating paths and ruts and mud holes on the land too. And of course, I had heard in the general conversation that livestock are terrible for the planet, and animals, cow farts are causing climate change and all this stuff. I was in that camp because I didn't know there was another camp to be in. I'm pro earth, so I thought that was the line. And so I was very skeptical. And I brought it to Cally and I was like, Cal, what do you think of this? Does this make sense to you? Is this possible? And we went around and around and debated it, with each other and among, with ourselves. And we decided to, we were desperate. We didn't have anything else. And we're going to give it a shot. And so we started with, we're like, okay, we do, Alan Savory's using sheep and cattle and, gazelle and elephants, and what do we need here in Vermont? What's appropriate here? What can we manage? And we talked about cows, bringing the cows back, right? But they were too big for me. I'm scared of cows, too big and powerful, and I am intimidated by them, honestly. And we talked about goats because there are some goat farms in the area that have good luck with goats. And I was like, but they always get out and they're too smart. And we talked about sheep at one point, and I forget where that conversation went. We're like kind of open to sheep. And then but we settled on chickens in the first testing because they were like, hey, if chickens get out, our neighbors won't call the police. We don't have to, they won't block up the road forever and there won't be a panic. And so, and if it doesn't work, we'll have 50 chickens for the freezer, So we built these Joel Salatin style mobile coops and dragged them every 12 hours forward and fed the chickens grain, but we dragged it right down through the middle of a dead field. And that was, it's a 12-acre field and it was all gravel, and the chickens did their work of I didn't know what they were doing, to be honest, at the time. I can tell you now what they were doing was breaking up the soil capping, adding their fertilizer, um, and creating a layer of armor in their matted manure across the top of the soil to cover it up and trampling anything that was there. Essentially restarting the carbon cycle in those places where they had been, and the water cycle, because breaking up the soil capping let the water in finally to the seed bed down below that could then start to germinate. None of that I could have told you then. All I knew was there was a green mohawk of grass coming down the middle of my field at the end of the summer, and I couldn't believe it. We had been losing crops for 2 years, so this was 2014, probably 15, I guess, something like that. 14 maybe, no, 14, and been panicking for 2 years about what to do, and then this one little thing worked, and that's all we needed, was this one little thing to prove to us that it worked. And that's when it dawned on me, oh, the animals aren't bad for the landscape. Bad management of animals is bad for the landscape. It's not, every thriving and abundant ecosystem on the planet is loaded with creatures of all kinds. They're not there, just expressing their natural behaviors. Animals are terrible for the planet when they're put into industrial systems, and forced to behave unnaturally and eat unnatural diets. So we just kind of set about redesigning our farm to rebuild the natural systems that were there, and have, our mantra is natural animals behaving naturally in natural environments on natural diets. That's how you rebuild nature, right? And or at least help nature thrive. That's how you get out of its way, I guess is a better way to put it. To work with it, not against it. So the chicken experiment worked, and then we doubled down. We got more chickens, and then we got turkeys in the next year. And we thought we were going to be a poultry farm. We thought, this is working. This is great. We're making money, because we ended up selling all the chickens. Got none in our freezer. Sold the turkeys, and the economic uptick started then, right? So the day that we decided to put down the chemicals and fertilizers and stuff, we saved a whole bunch of money right away on that, just not doing that. And that was like 5 figures a year that we would spend to produce a smaller 5 figures on hay production, right? And the chickens were doing the work that all these chemicals and tillage and seeders did, and making us money, right? So it was a huge swing for us economically, even though, we made maybe $400 on chicken that year. It was still, we were not paying 5 figures to produce crop. And then we ran the numbers, and we said, okay, we have all this acreage. How many chickens do we need to raise a year to start seeing these benefits across the whole farm, for the chickens to get to every piece of this land? And the calculator literally spit out the number 1 million. And
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was stunned when it happened, and it was like the universe saying no. It's just saying F no. And so my wife and I looked at each other, and we're like, we didn't even really think about it. We're like, no, nobody wants that. You can't have 1 million birds. The management alone it would be terrifying. Where do you have them processed? Where do you have them sold? So we didn't do that. So we were like, well, okay, if we're trying to recreate the natural systems here in a grassland environment, the birds follow some sort of creature, some sort of ruminant or grazer. let's get the grass grazer relationship going. So we decided to get a lamb or 2 lambs to start grazing ahead of the chickens. And the very next day, a woman knocked on our door and said, "I'm looking for a home for 45 sheep. Do you guys know anybody?" And we took that as a sign, and we're like, well, let's do it. And we swallowed hard, and we, accepted the flock and got started in sheep. And that was again a very severe education, quick and severe education in how to be a shepherd. Because what arrived on the farm was a flock of grain-fed sheep, a breed called Katahdin, which I love and adore. But this particular flock had been indoors and fed grain for several generations and had developed this dependency on grain. So when we naively put them all out on rolling green hills, they looked happy. They bounced on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. They started slowing down and looking less okay. And then a lot of them started to get like very slow to get up and tired looking and skinny and skinnier and skinnier. And they were eating all that they had more than enough grass around and forage to eat. And I had no idea what was going on until we figured out that they were grain dependent and that had been bred for these high octane diets that they needed to sustain their rapid growth. And so we had to start this long breeding process, 7-year breeding process of breeding this flock back to their natural diets. So when we say natural animals, that's what we mean, like animals that aren't bred for the industrial process, but are bred for a natural farming process. Which if you're in any kind of meat operation, a lot of the genetics are hard to get back to grass-fed only. And there's some great, I don't want to say it's not out there, it's out there, but it's not as easy as, hey, let's just open the barns and let these cows out and let them eat the grass they're supposed to. There's more to it than that. A lot of these animals have been made unnatural and will not survive in nature, unfortunately. So that was kind of a wake-up call for us. But when the sheep arrived and we got our breeding program dialed in, the amount of land that we could then impact positively went from 700 square feet of a field a year to 20 acres a year. And that's when the real explosion in life happened on the farm, and those are some of my favorite memories of just bouncing through these regenerating fields, watching the butterflies come back and watching the worms come back and the foxes and deer and spiders and hawks. And it's all still there, but those early days of watching it return was like dancing through a Disney movie, where bluebirds on your shoulder kind of stuff. And so it's been a immensely rewarding experience once you get past all the the snickering and name calling that those quote unquote flatlanders don't know what they're doing, all that kind of stuff, because you're trying to do it differently than we were trying to do it differently than the people around us. And so we took some knocks, and I'm not particularly thick skinned, so it did hurt. I'm not gonna, and I wasn't sure that what we were doing was going to succeed, but now that we have been able to prove it economically and ecologically, we're just trying to spread the message and help everybody who comes to us.
What does that look like now, Jesse? You've got the sheep, you've got the chickens. What other farming and animal husbandry practices do you have going?
Right now, the those are the two main enterprises. Our sheep that are we raising Katahdins now, grass-fed Katahdins, for both the meat and the sheepskins, which is a really good thing to be in right now. And then we have a layer egg flock, mostly for my boy, who thinks he owns an egg business, but really Cally and I do most of it. But yeah, that's his enterprise. And then we have the meat birds that we raise. And then we do our own hay, of course, but we don't sell it off the farm anymore. We use it here. Those are the main agricultural enterprises. And then we have, our vegetable garden and we do some sunflowers and all that kind of thing just for us. But that's one leg of the stool that holds us up. The other is the agritourism, where people are coming to see this regenerated landscape. And then the third leg is consulting and education.
Hey everybody, this is Neil. We are going to get back to this great conversation in just 1 second. But I think it's fair to say that right now we are facing some pretty unprecedented challenges in the 21st century. I mean, you name it, environmentally, socially, economically, we've got some big problems that we need to overcome. And that's why, for me personally, and the people that work with us at Latitude, we want to dedicate our time and our energy so that we are not only working to put food on the table and a roof over our heads, but also make the world a better place. And so if you are at all interested in combining your sustainability values with a very powerful financial model of real estate, then I highly encourage you to check out what we are doing at Latitude. We are creating something truly special with a tribe of change agents that for now is working across North America. And hopefully one day in the future, with you coming on board, we can be working across the globe. So please check us out. You can go to www.chooselatitude.com, or you can find us on social media at latitude.realty on Instagram, and we are also on Facebook. Okay, let's get back into it.
Before we get into the farm stays and the education and even the regenerative food network, because I do want to eventually end up there, you went through what it sounds like just one big steep learning curve.
Yeah, it's
like what's some advice that you would give either maybe new farmers that they've got this land that is severely degraded? Like how do you think that you could expedite somebody's learning curve to get them on the right path?
First of all, I would celebrate anybody jumping into farming now. It is a great time to become a farmer, especially a regenerative farmer. There's more interest now than ever before. There's more money now available for financing these kinds of things. It's a great time to do it. People are looking for people meaning investors, but people meaning just the general public are looking for economic returns, sure, but also non-economic returns like wildlife habitat, deeper topsoil, cleaner water, biodiversity, all of these valuable ecological outputs that these farms are creating, but also the social good and are you feeding your community, and are you feeding them nutritiously, and are you so there's one thing that this style of farming does is it addresses so many of the root causes of so many of the problems we're facing today. Just regenerative resource management of a landscape makes the foundation of the society so much stronger. So we're building self-reliance, not racing toward dependency on outside sources. So that's all to say, it's a great time to get in. it's not easy. I'm approaching mid 40s. All right. I'm mid 40s now, and I'm getting the physical stuff is harder for me. I'm getting old and tired. It's a young person's game. If you're 20, 30, I didn't start till I was 33, 32, 33, somewhere in there. And I was fine then, but it does take its toll. The best advice I ever got, which I'm just forward, is go slowly. Don't try to do everything in your first year. Never pick anything up. Go get the tractor and let the hydraulics pick things up, or use your brain, use leverage, use a crowbar. I can't tell you how many injuries come from asking your body to do more than it should. And don't rely on one stream of income alone for your farm. Build a series of enterprises on the land. That's how it's going to be profitable to own the land. And what those enterprises are up to you. That it has to fit your context. Try to make them symbiotic so they reinforce one another. And try to make them diverse enough that if one collapses, the others aren't taken out. Like, for example, with those 3 enterprises we have on our farm, when COVID hit our area and the Airbnbs were shut down overnight, and we lost a huge revenue stream, the food sales picked up overnight because grocery store shelves were empty. And so we were all right. The margins were a little bit worse in food than in Airbnb, of course, but we had orders coming in, we had food coming out, we had going out, we had cash flow, and we made it through. But it was resilient. It was the resilience of the structure of the enterprise that got us through. Because we weren't, pardon the expression, we didn't put all our eggs in one basket. And so that's my advice.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And what it brings up for me is localism is the only way forward out of this mess for us. But you sort of hit on, I love the holistic framework that the Savory Institute puts out. And I'm sure that you're a big fan of that, just judging by the hat that you're wearing, which says Savory on it.
I am blown away by the Savory Institute and the Savory Network that they've collected. Some of the best people I've ever met in the planet. I'm going to be absolutely hyperbolic when I speak about the Savory Network, but I mean it all. They're good people doing good work for the right reasons all around the planet, have been nothing but supportive, and not looking for the paycheck, not looking for the glory, not looking for the ego. They're not in it for the ego. They just want to see the world thrive and continue for all creatures, humans and every other creature here. And the framework that Alan Savory developed, the holistic management framework, has allowed us to survive and plan out these enterprises. It's a tool we use every day, and it allows us to manage these complex systems we're working in. Like the human brain can only hold 3 or 4 variables at one time, right? Even like concert organists can get to maybe 6 with a lot of practice to make their, the different keyboards they got working and the different foot pedals they got working together. After that, we need to start writing things down and returning to them, and then memory gets involved, and we just start stumbling, right? So the problem of managing complex systems, whether it's the ecosystem or the economy or family dynamics or what have you, with more variables, millions more variables than you can hold in your head at one time, the way we've solved that, we've approached that in modern agriculture, is to nuke out all the variables, right? So we bring in these poisons and these ripping machines and eliminate all the variables down to a field of sand and rock that where there's nothing that can surprise us, and then we bring in everything we need to grow there, right? So we bring in the fertilizer, we bring in the fertility, we bring in the water, we bring in the seed, and we bring in the machines so that, we can manage a system, complicated system, not a complex system, a complicated system, well, productively and on some sort of predictable schedule, and I understand why. It's the unintended consequences that come from eliminating all those other important variables that play in an ecosystem that we're wrestling with now, with pollution and climate change and food that's devoid of nutrition and rural collapse and all these things are tied into it. And so what holistic management does is helps you map out all those variables that you know of and can see, and there's so many that you can't, but map it all out and chart your way through to a specified goal, and that's kind of like your context. You sit down and you say, what do I want the world to be in 50 years, right? This is what I want it to look like: abundant, peaceful. I want my family to be, hardworking, honest, well cared for, generous, generous people. How do I have to act to get there? How do these enterprises have to act to get there? How do we have to treat the environment to get there? And you can chart your way through. If it's a lot of people who, after coming through holistic management training, feel like they've been upgraded to a superhero because of the new skill set they have in making all these decisions that most of the times we're like, I don't know that one. F it. Let's just go that direction, which may look great on the surface, but may steer you off a cliff in a year. So it's been incredibly useful. So, all right.
Yeah,
I'll get off.
That's amazing. I think it's applicable for life. And what's so powerful that I see is that it's a framework in which can handle that complexity. It's not a model. And so oftentimes these models, it works in a particular context. And then you
That's
go
right.
to Vermont or to Wisconsin or to wherever, and it's going to fall apart.
And it really shines in agriculture, but it's not limited to agriculture.
Yeah.
Right. The holistic management, people talk about holistically managed farms. Pardon me. People talk about holistically managed farms, but it's not limited to that. You can manage any complex system holistically, and in fact should. It can be a holistically managed household, a holistically managed corporation, organization. I was going to say something else, but I forget. Anyway,
let's pick it up where you were talking about the farm stays, and
yeah.
we dialogued on this over email. I was talking with a young farmer group that trains young farmers, and we're really talking about the economics of getting into farming. Because we see a lot of young folks that are very interested in returning back to the land, that they're compelled for values and for what they want to see in the world, but they're staring down this gargantuan problem of how do we afford farmland?
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem, and that's where I think I really like how you've not only just like stacked business functions within a polycultural farming endeavor, but you're also looking at outside ways to generate income. And I'll tell you, just I got a lot of pushback for even suggesting something like farm stays, because they're really concerned about, I don't know, mission drift.
Sure.
And I understand that, but at the same time, the people that I see that are really being successful in farming. They're taking a bit of a wider stance than we're just going to make it on row cropping. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, back to your earlier question about what advice would you give farmers, who are starting out. I have given advice. I'm going to revise my answer. When people ask me that, my advice is the first step to starting a farm is starting your Airbnb. And that's strikes people in a lot of different ways, right? Yes, I would love more than anything to farm, sell my crops, and go back to farming. We're not there yet. The food system is not there yet. The margins are too slim. Producing food only from the land, is extremely difficult. The margins are so slim that it's risky every year in most places. There are booming operations that do it well and are profitable, and I tip my hat to them, and they know how hard they work to create that. And they're at the mercy of the weather. It's not a resilient system. Early frost, or a late frost, I should say, can ruin a whole crop. Might be 20% of their, revenue for the year. They're at the mercy of in this complex system. So we have to build resiliency into these systems that are unpredictable. And we can do that by a diversity of stacked enterprises, right? So I understand the desire for farming to be profitable enough to support land, family, careers. In my region, we're not there yet. So we need something else. And this is why farmers, one of the old timers in town told me every farm has something else, and there's a bumper sticker going, that you may have seen, that says, behind every successful farmer, there's a wife who works in town, and we should update that to say spouse who works in town, because there are more women farmers out there now than in Vermont, probably, than men. But that's been the story of farming is, you lose money in the farming and you have to make it up somewhere else so that you keep the land, and if you're losing $10,000 a year in farming, which you have to do to keep your land in the tax programs that make it feasible for you to pay your taxes, right? So in Vermont, there's a current use program. If your land is in current use, current production, current agricultural production, your taxes are, 10% of what they would be if your property taxes are 10% of what they would be if you weren't farming. So if you stop farming, boom, suddenly you can't afford your own land. And so you have to farm it, which means you have to lose that money, which means you need a job somewhere to make up that difference. Or somebody does, and when Cally and I started farming, I had an off the farm job. Cally had an off the farm job. Cally's uncle, who lives on the farm with us, had an off the farm job, and we were all pooling resources to keep it afloat as we lost crops and as we lost money. And we walk up the hill one day to a schoolhouse cottage that Cally's great grandfather bought for $300 back in 1940. It was overgrown. Shutters were falling off of it. It looked pretty rough. And for reasons I won't get into, there was a lead problem in the brick house, in the farmhouse, and my son Angus was drinking water with lead in it, unbeknownst to us, and so we had like a scare, and he's fine, but we had a scare then, and we're like, we got to get out of this house, walk up the hill to this little cottage, and it is falling in on itself, and hadn't been updated since maybe the 70s or something like that. And we just set to work thinking we were building our own house, gutting everything, remodeling everything, modernizing everything. And then it ended up, we spent so much money doing that and taking out loans to do that, that we couldn't afford to pay them back or live in it anymore. So we had this great house, but we couldn't afford to live in it. We didn't want to take out more loans for a house that wasn't be owned by us personally. It was owned by the family. So we put it on Airbnb. We took pictures, we put it on Airbnb as a way to recoup the cost of the remodel. And then we, the idea was we'd move in once we do that. But it just booked out. It just booked out amazingly well at great nightly rates, and we were blown over by it. And it booked out for a year in advance, and then it just kept booking. And so our job very quickly became short-term rentals and changing sheets and washing toilets and at a great hourly rate. And we were able to put down one of our off the farm jobs. And then as it got even stronger, we were able to put down another off the farm job. And what happened there was we had our something else, right? Instead of our something else being off the farm and taking us away from the stewardship of the land, this new farm stay on the land venture was bringing in enough that we could do only that, but it's kept us on the land, so we could begin to steward and care for the land every day, and then run off to wash a toilet, and then come back to the land, and then move the sheep. And because it allowed us to stay on the land, we were able to make the transition into regenerative ag and build these new other enterprises as well. So it doesn't fit every person's context to be scrubbing toilets, and I get that. We happen to have this cottage, and I get that. But if you're starting a farm and you're buying a farm with a house on it, really consider putting the farmhouse on Airbnb and living in a yurt or a tiny home or something cheap while you get all the other enterprises running. It's one of those things that the livestock reinforce the farm stays, because people want to come and see the sheep running through the fields and the chickens. And the farm stays reinforce the livestock operation, because the customers are coming right to our doorstep and they want to buy the lamb and they want to buy the sheepskins and they want to buy the chicken. So it's a symbiotic relationship there. And then they really just spin each other up. And so we've been able to grow and acquire more land with more business plans about livestock farm stay operations, which has been a surprise to say the least, and really encouraging. And I hope what we're doing is building a model of how others can do it, and to learn from our boneheadedness and our successes equally.
Yeah, I certainly think you are, and I've checked out your Instagram feed, and it looks like just this really bucolic, amazing farm stay to hang out at. I know that. So you have also started the Regenerative Food Network, but you also expanded through, I believe, the expansion was through Steward, which is a regenerative agriculture capital network where people can invest their dollars into helping regenerative farmers with their operations. Let's kind of meander the conversation into that. And
Great.
I'd love to know a little bit more about both, or if they're one and the same.
Well, we could continue with Steward. Steward helped us with our ag and farm stay expansion. So that came about in a really funny way, actually. There's this, our farm has ended up being this sort of horseshoe shape on the land, right? And it horseshoes around this one hilltop, which is really gorgeous, and was never actually part of the farm, but another farm down the road owned that hilltop. And about 20 years ago, the other farm sold it to a local guy, very nice guy who built a house on top of it. It's a lovely house, but it stares down on our farm. And so everywhere we went, we were looking up at this house, looking down on us. And that's what happens when farming land isn't profitable anymore. The farmer sells it off and somebody builds a house. And so in 2002, that house went up. And we consider ourselves very lucky as the farm family down below, because A, they were great people, and B, it could have been 50 houses up there because it's a 50-acre lot. And so we kind of, recognized the situation and wiped our brow. Was like, oh man, that could have been worse. So, but I also said, someday I'm going to buy that house. Someday I'm going to make that part of the farm, not knowing how and not knowing, not having a dollar to my name. But so one day while I'm talking to that neighbor, I said, hey, if you ever want to sell, I'd love to know about it. And he's like, okay. And I never thought of it again. And then I happened to say that again to a neighbor to the south of us, saying, hey, if you ever sell, I'd love to know about it. No pressure. He's like, okay. And I never thought about it again. And then one day I'm on the farm and I'm preparing to go down to Virginia to visit my brother, who also passed of brain cancer. And I was going down to help him, but my neighbor calls me as I'm like packing. He's like, hey, can we talk? The one up the hill. And I said, yeah. And I thought, like, the guests in the Airbnb were flying drones over his house, or like they got too loud, or like somebody threw a beer can or something. I was like nervous for the conversation. And he says, hey, that's it. I've had it with the winters here. I'm going to Florida. Do you want to put an offer on the house? And I said, I thought this would be 25 years from now, like when I had figured out how to be an adult and had a bowl full of money, And he's like, nope, I'll give you 30 days and then I got to put it on the market. And I thanked him because that was insanely generous. And then I'm reeling from that conversation, trying to figure out how to buy this land. And I go and I sit down at my desk in the office in the barn, and I just kind of like absent-mindedly scrolling through my email, and this email comes in from my neighbor to the south, and he says, hey, I told you I'd never sell this land, but I'm getting offers sight unseen from folks in Connecticut, because this was like COVID flight prime time. And he said, I think now's the time. Do you want to make an offer on the land? And it was the same. I remember it was a Thursday afternoon, and I was like, well, again, I think the universe is telling me something here. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to figure it out. And so I put together this business plan real quick based on what would be possible if we had the property to the north and the property to the south, for expansion into more farm stays and more livestock production. Pardon me. And I shopped it around to the banks in the area that I had relationships with, like, checking accounts and whatever, my personal stuff, and people I knew and were friendly with. And when I walked in, and there was two banks, one bank, one credit union, and they were very polite, energized, enthusiastic, interested in the business plan and funding it. And they came out to the farm, and they walked around separate occasions to like view the property, and both properties and the expansion and all that. And it took a month to get through all these meetings, all this due diligence, all these visits. And within a week of the last day of the month, both of them said, nope, can't do it. We don't fund small farms. The underwriters kicked it back to us. It's too risky. And I wasn't surprised, but I was also kind of heartbroken. I was like, I have 4 days now left to find this money. I don't know what to do. I'm going to lose this, what I regarded as a once in a lifetime, once in a generation chance to keep this land out of development and protect the family farm and expand our enterprises. And you only have so many abutters, you know what I mean? So then a cousin of my wife who worked on the farm for years and wanted to get into the regenerative ag world was applying for jobs in the Bay Area. And he came across this company called Steward and applied for a job with Steward and texted me randomly. He said, "Hey, I just applied for a job with this company named Steward. I didn't get the job, but is this anybody you want to talk to about anything you got going on?" And he didn't know about this expansion idea. And I said, "I have just the thing." And so he put me in touch with the senior project manager there. I emailed her my business plan, and it just kind of went up the chain to Dan Miller, who I know you've had on the podcast. And we all kind of met together and looked at it, and he said, "This would be the biggest project we've ever done. We've done $50,000, we've done $100,000. This is $1.4 million project. We've never done anything this big, but let's give it a shot. Let's see what we can do." And my wife and I were just like blown away. And they said yes when everybody else said no. And so they did their due diligence in record time, determined that they could finance a bridge loan for us. And before the money moved, once the determination was made, I was able to call my neighbor with a qualified offer and say, "This is my offer." And so that all went forward, and we closed on that property. It's now up and it's renting, and we close on the next property here in a few weeks. And I could not be happier with Steward and the whole organization. So we went through that bridge loan process, and while they gave us like a 6-month bridge loan for the initial purchase, understanding time was of the essence. And then while during that 6 months, we built out their participated loan campaign, which is the public facing loan raising initiative, right? And we launched that, and to bring in $1.4 million, and they were instrumental in getting me into the right conversations with potential lenders and onto podcasts like this, obviously, and blog posts out, and making a whole bunch of noise about it. And we just closed the loan. We crossed the finish line just a few days ago. I'm actually still in post graduation letdown mode, where I'm taking too many naps and getting the sniffles and all that kind of thing. But it was a huge win, and so we were able to pay back the bridge loan and buy this next property and have enough funds to launch 2 more Airbnb VRBO farm stay initiatives and expand the flock. And now we're grazing an additional 75 acres of land, and so earlier I said there's more interest in regenerative ag than I've ever seen. People see it as such a place to put their hope. So what Steward, and I'm convinced of that because of the responses we got from the Steward campaign. Crowds, I think we had near 300 lenders. There were some big ones in there that got us to 1.4, but the response to this kind of campaign was really moving, and the enthusiasm was there and moving. And I think the genius behind the Steward platform is opening up a door for individuals, smaller lenders, organizations to put their money in a secured way with a decent return into projects that actually regenerate the landscape and help small family farms and build topsoil and build biodiversity and clean water, and there's such a hunger for that out in the world that very few investment lending products satisfy, and Steward is building a highway for money into regeneration, and I could not be more indebted to them. They're a great team, and I'm very humbled and appreciative of their work.
Yeah, I have always, since the first interaction that I've had with Steward, you realize that it takes somebody with the skill set of going through and building a crowdfunding platform for real estate to then say, well, how can we uniquely fit into a different but similar industry and provide capital so that the whole industry can flourish.
Yeah.
And the ability for people like that, the storyline that enables people to invest into their own local food chain is something we've never seen before. And it's such a different feeling and I'm speaking as someone that has lent to several Steward campaigns now, is that it's very different than, let's say, putting money into like Tesla stock or some big tech company that's claiming that they've got the technological solution that they can exponentially scale some solution to capture carbon.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah. The technological solution it evolved over millions of years. It's called grass. Grass and cows and whatnot. But no, I don't think it could have been done by another team, clearly, because it wasn't and hadn't been. There are people try to copy it now, and I bless their efforts. I really hope they succeed as well. I think there's room enough here for everybody. I don't think we have to take a scarcity mindset here. I think there's our competition shouldn't be one another. It should be the giant banks who are ripping mountains apart for the energy inside.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Well, Jesse, how about this? Can we talk about the Regenerative Food Network? Because I'm also really curious about how that all is coming together to form out like what you're doing, because it seems like this is a whole new endeavor in one sense, or just a deepening of your endeavors.
That's been, I'd love to. That's been fun. So the way that came about was, we had found the floor of farming. We had, through I don't want to say bad management because it feels icky, because I loved Edie so much and it was her initiative, but I'll say conventional management, where the more chemicals you add, the harder it is to produce crops the next year. And so you have to add more fertilizer, and the fertilizer starves out the biology. So there's less biology. So you need more fertilizer and more chemicals every year. It just gets to be more and more and more expensive to produce crops while your field is getting less and less and less fertile and able to produce on its own. So we'd found that floor. We had farmed out a bunch of our farm. We successfully then flipped the model, and instead of downward spiral, we started the upward spiral with these positive feedback loops of, everywhere the chickens and sheep went, the farm became more fertile and put out more grass, which meant we could have more sheep and more chickens, and therefore we had even more grass and more sheep and more grass and more sheep, and it just started spiraling up in the right direction. And we just kept getting stronger every year, ecologically and economically. But we hit a very low ceiling very quickly, and that was in the local ag infrastructure. The processing wasn't there, right? I looked at my land and I said, I could have 1,000 sheep on this farm, but there's not enough processing in the area. So where would I have them all processed? There's not enough, and there's not enough local market demand to sell them all here. So where do I sell them? How do I get them out of town? So while the land could support a big agricultural endeavor, the infrastructure wasn't in place to support it economically. So I was, invited to speak to different groups from time to time. Very happy to do it, just to give my experience of what we've done at Studio Hill and how we've, turned that around from headed for collapse to headed for abundance. And invariably, everybody at the end of each of these, they say, why isn't everybody doing this? Why aren't more farms doing this? And the answer is, more farms can't do this, because if they get into this, there's no economic path to maximize your land, right? There's a very low ceiling, and they understand if you can have 12 sheep harvested a year, that's not a profitable enterprise, but that's all that the system has capacity for. So they don't get into it. They get into something that they can move and sell. And so I was making this argument to a group at the back room of a bookstore, and this one gentleman in the back of the room was very quiet during the whole presentation, but paying attention very closely. And he came up to me at the end of the meeting, and he said, there's money to do this. And I said, okay, do what? And he said, no, there's money to do this, to build the abattoirs and to build the tanneries, the all natural organic tanneries, which I'll get into later, and to build the distribution system. And if we bring electric vehicles into this, and we put renewable energies out on the farms, then we could actually build a system where we have carbon sequestering, ecosystem restoring food delivered to the cities in electric vehicles powered by renewable energy that came from the farms that raised the food. And then what we have is the complete system where there is no externalized costs, where humans can actually, take an evolutionary step forward, where, or at least break this system of modern agriculture. Wherever we go, we make the land less able to feed and sustain us. This other model, like my sheep, everywhere they go, they make the environment more able to feed and sustain them, which is why they've survived as a species. We're not going to survive as a species if we keep making the land that feeds us less fertile and externalizing all these costs onto healthcare and onto human health and onto the tax system to do it. So we thought, yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be like the right system to build, let's try. And so, but I was skeptical, and I said, yeah, you go do that. That'd be fine. I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm farming. And he looks up at the ceiling. He goes, okay, I'm going to do it. And I didn't hear from him for like 9 months. Right. And I blew it off. I didn't even remember the conversation. And he emailed me 9 months later. He's like, hey, I've been doing a lot of talking with a lot of people. Can you meet me? And I said, okay. So we went back to that bookstore. He said, I've spoken to everybody I can get a meeting with in Vermont and around, and they agree building out this infrastructure is needed, and we're going to do it. We're forming a company called the Regenerative Food Network. We want you, as your farm, Studio Hill, to be a partner with us in it, as the heading up the ag side of it. And we're going to bring in this, this partner for the renewable energy side of it, and we'll do the finance side of it. And I you know, I went home. I didn't make a decision. I went home and I Googled him. Right. And it turned out he had been he had just retired to Vermont. He had just retired. He calls himself a climate refugee because he had a house on the coast of Florida that was being threatened by all the hurricanes. And he said, I don't think we have 5 years here, before we get wiped off the map. So he moved up to Vermont where he had some family nearby, and he considered it ecologically pretty stable. And he had been the president of Credit Suisse Europe, the only American to hold that spot, and had been working in renewable energy projects around the globe for 20 years in these giant billion-dollar solar and geothermal projects. Like, he was the real deal, and had left all his career is like littered with leaving these big banks, because they were morally suspect, and he kept going to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one, and ended up very happy at Credit Suisse, is my understanding, doing these renewable energy projects. And then he retired, and he was big into the World Wildlife Fund, and had this whole thing about in Bhutan preserving the Bhutanese national forests forever, and setting up a foundation to do that called Bhutan for Life. Anyway, impressive man and resume that I just blew off in a bookstore. And luckily he's also patient and understanding, and came back to me. And so we said, yes, let's do it. I said, yes, let's do this. And so that's been our goal for the last 3 years, is to build in the infrastructure into this region that we need to start regenerating the landscape, right? How do we get more holistic managers out into the land, onto farms? How do we get more hooves on the ground, managed the right way? Encouraging natural behaviors in natural animals, in natural landscapes, that push, right? How do we get more of that out there? What do we need to support them? And how do we sell the products? And so we've been, creating this, what I call demand-led enterprise, where we're going out to schools and companies and wholesalers, and finding the demand for, let's say, lamb, and taking that back. Once we get the deal, we go back to the farmers and say, listen, we just sold 1,000 lamb. Would you be interested in raising some of those, right? And building this producer network out through the region of small family farms, and going to them with the demand, so that they don't have to find it, so that they don't have to risk anything, like guaranteed contracts, guaranteed sale. We don't want the risk to be on the farmer at all. And we're not dictating practices either. That's key. Is we'll work with any farmer out there that is producing quality products, and if they're in livestock, doing it humanely. Quality products raised humanely, and we'll work with them to use our infrastructure, use our network, use our distribution. But if you're interested then in getting more for your money, get more for your products, more for your crops, more for your animals, we have deals with, these set of companies that are looking for ecologically verified beneficial products. And we use the Savory EOV program, the Ecological Outcome Verification Program, to monitor and track the ecological impact of this farm's production model, this or any farm's production model, to verify that it is in fact regenerating the natural resources of the land. And once a farm is verified in that way, we can get them a lot more money for their product, because companies like, I don't know, I don't want to name any names, but like big companies are looking for verified product. The demand is much larger than the supply at the moment. And we can then all of a sudden make use of so much more that usually goes to waste. Let's say because I'm a livestock farmer, I'll talk about that. But like if a sheep steps off the trailer, normally I'm getting paid for the meat that the animal, you know, provides to us. That's all the market has any interest in, usually. Once that animal is coming from a verified regenerating production system or farm or landscape, suddenly companies want the sheepskin, and suddenly companies want the bone broth, and suddenly companies want even the eyeballs and tongue and the other organs for pet food or human food, and people, they even want the eviscerate to go into compost, and so that means that everything, we can respect the life of the animal better by using every piece of it and not stupidly regarding any of it as waste, which I think is a huge moral failing on our part usually. But also we can get the farmer paid for all the value coming off of their land, and therefore a much bigger check for their work. So Regenerative Food Network right now has opened an abattoir. We've opened a vegetable tanning, sheepskin tannery, where the worst thing coming out of the process is just salt, changing the dynamic. I mean, the economics of raising a sheep, whereas instead of just 300 for the meat, you get 300 for the meat retail, and then we can make $300 to $400 retail on the skin alone, which makes the dollars per acre for production go through the roof. And I'm sitting right now in the central hub, a 45,000 square foot facility that we're building out to be a processing and distribution hub. And the electric trucks are, in the plan, and the renewable energy is still in the plan, but we focused on getting production up and running and all that stuff in the first 3 years. But it's a 10-year plan, and we hope that in 10 years we will have small collection points, whether they're for produce or slaughterhouses, out through the region of the northeastern US, from Maine down into Pennsylvania, out where the farmers are, so they don't have to travel 4, 6, 12 hours to drop off their goods for sale. We can provide them the resources, training, financing, processing that they need out of these smaller outposts, and then we aggregate them all into these larger hubs and turn them into high value products that we've found the market demands, whether that's a sheepskin slipper or a frozen pizza. We're doing all of it and then getting it to those markets, or getting it back to the farmer if they want to sell it out of their own farm store and they're under their own label. And the idea being that in 10 years, we will have a food production system that supports the small family farmer by connecting them to giant markets with huge demand for ecologically regenerative products, so that we can actually reverse the Walmart effect and start bringing money back from the cities into the rural areas where the natural resources of the rural area are regenerating.
Unbelievable. Can you tie in the renewable energy part for me again, just so that?
Sure. Well, it's a lot of moving of product, right? So we need to be moving product from the small spokes out to the hub, and from the hub to other hubs, and then from the hub down to New York. And when we were looking into designing this electric truck distribution system, it became clear to us that we needed charging points at multiple spots in the route, right? And we thought, well, if we need to build charging points for reliable recharging of our distribution trucks, where are we buying that power? If we want to be able to claim that this lamb that you're eating in New York is actually regenerating the resources, is the power that got it to you just ripping down a mountain in West Virginia, or is it Russian oil? What are we supporting with this?
Mhm.
So in order to get, to be fully transparent and regenerative, we thought, well, let's put solar farms, solar arrays on farms that are producing the meat for us, right? So we don't want to replace any farmland at all, but there's a way to set up solar in ag land where animals can graze under and around it, and it actually partially shaded grass can produce more than grass in full sun. So like you can actually increase your biomass by doing this. So it's a way to then allow us to buy the energy we need to move the food around from the farmers in these rural areas as well. Not to mention powering the food processing hubs and all that sort of thing. So it's a way to make sure even more of the dollars go back to the farmers that are regenerating our natural resources, doing the good work we so desperately need right now. And my dream is, in some number of years, and I won't say publicly what number is in my head, but in some number of years, I could exit this regional effort to build this system and just farm and sell my energy and sell my lamb to, this system that I, that we created. It's all a means to me to land being profitable enough and agricultural production being profitable enough that we can just do that and be proper stewards of the land again.
Wow. I'm just on the edge of my chair over here, just trying to seep it all in. I can't even begin to tell you, Jesse, how just inspirational that is, and seeing how you've really had to take a systems approach to, if this, then that, then this, and
If this, yeah, it's ultimately very practical.
Yeah.
It's thank you, first of all. I mean, it's huge, and it's I try not to think about it after 9 p.m. because I won't sleep, but it's huge, it's daunting, and it's one day at a time, and we are moving at breakneck speed in the right direction. And I'm just thrilled by the team we have and how hard they're working for the right things for the right reason. And our policy is hire the person and train for skills, so the people that are here are really committed and here for not for ego, not for to be the savior. They're people who have hope and they have humility, and that's kind of what we're trying to cultivate here. We talk about big things, but we're not promising anything other than we're going to work hard, we're going to try, and we'll see how far we get. We think this is the right thing to do. Tomorrow it may look different, but we have a 10-year plan and committed to seeing that through. And whether we succeed or not, we are employing good people with good jobs that mean a lot to them in the meantime.
Yeah.
So
hope and humility. I wrote that down. What amazing hiring criteria. But Jesse, let's wrap this thing up. How can people find more about your work with Studio Hill and the Regenerative Food Network, and everything that you're doing? What are some good ways to do that?
Well, let's see. My farm is at studiohill.farm. If you go there, you can see some pretty pictures and book an Airbnb stay with us. We'd love for any of your listeners to come and see what we're doing. The Regenerative Food Network is at regenfood.net. There's a particularly interesting projects page there you should check out about all the things that we're doing. I would encourage everybody to go see Steward and fund their make a loan to one of their projects on there. And if you have something that you are thinking about getting funded on your farm, reach out. They're tremendous people to work with, and they are at gosteward.com. And then, if you're interested in seeing this stuff in real person and you're not in the Northeast or if you are looking to see this in person and want to find something around you in your part of the world, go to savory.global. And there are hubs all over the world where you can go and see regeneration of landscapes and ecosystems taking place, and in person in real time. It is energizing and tremendously hopeful. And I think that these tremendous examples of widespread regeneration doing it much better than we are in many cases, are crucial for us to see a new path forward. We are so fixated on the end of the world that sometimes we can't see around it or another way past. But go to one of these places and see what the future could be, and then help us get to work building it.
Okay, everyone, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in to another great episode. If you're not already a subscriber, please do so wherever you get your podcast. You can create good karma by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or sharing this show with your friends. If you're looking for ways to get more involved in the regenerative real estate movement, then you are in luck. We have a Facebook community conveniently called Regenerative Real Estate that you can join and be a co-creator with us on this journey. If you have a business or organization that you feel is aligned with our mission to use real estate as the catalyst for a regenerative future and would like to work together, then please be sure to get in touch. We are building an ecosystem to help amplify your work and message, where you can present to our community or sponsor the work that we are doing. You can do this by reaching out to us at team@chooselatitude.com. Last, and certainly not least, this podcast is enabled by the people that buy and sell real estate with us through our network of Latitude regenerative change agents located across North America. Our goal is to help transform homes and habitats, person by person, property by property. And we do that by combining the skills of a real estate professional with sustainable and regenerative consultation. It is time that we all start to live our values, and we hope to work with you on your next real estate sale or purchase. Okay, that is all for now. In the words of Paul Hawkins, remember that we are either stealing our future or healing our future. We are hard at work trying to do the latter. So until next time, be well.